Hello, this is Lois Oliver telling you a story about my adventure as a drug smuggler. First of all, you have to know some background about why I was doing this. And the first thing is that my sister, who's 2 years younger than me, married a Foreign Service officer who was stationed in Aleppo, Syria in 1958. And this was shortly after the Suez Crisis, and she was about to have her first baby. And the expectation was that she would go to the American University in Beirut hospital to have their first baby. But because of the Suez issue, she instead went to a small mission hospital in Gaziantep, Turkey. And the physician there was a graduate of the University of Michigan, and he was stationed there for 2 years. And the labor and delivery all went fine. And meanwhile, the families in the United States decided that someone should go over to help Nancy out with her first baby. My sister Nancy and her husband Art obviously had no other family in Aleppo, Syria. So I was teaching at the University of Pittsburgh School of Nursing. And if you will remember what life was like in 1958, if you're old enough, there were no jet planes. There were only prop planes. So a flight from the United States, 8,000 miles to Syria, would take 24 hours. And I had, as most of us did, a 2-week vacation. So I went to my dean and I said, I really need to have more time than 2 weeks. So could I have a 4-week unpaid leave of absence? And she bristled and said, you haven't been on the faculty long enough for any privileges, and therefore you can't. So I quit. And in September of 1958, I took off for Aleppo. And one of the things that people who have lived there will know is that things tend to sort of slow down when you're in the Arab world. And so I arrived in September, but I was still there in November, as we just didn't see any reason to go home since I didn't have a job. At any event, the parents of a baby Claire decided that they should take the baby back to the hospital to show off the baby to the doctor that he had delivered in August. And they contacted him, and he said he would be delighted to have them visit, and could they possibly bring him some antibiotics, because they were having an epidemic of meningococcal disease, which is a bug that's sensitive to penicillin and sulfa. And so my brother-in-law gleefully said, of course we can. So he said to me, go buy some penicillin and sulfa to take it with us to Turkey. And I said, I'm a nurse, I can't order drugs. And he said, this is Aleppo, just go into the pharmacy and tell them what you need. So I calculated a little bit and studied up a bit, and I went into the pharmacy and I bought 2 cartons, which each had 20 vials of penicillin, and 2 cartons, each of which had 12 vials of sulfatizine. So now I had 4 boxes of drugs. Art, meanwhile, had requested a Hormel ham from the PX in Beirut, which was shipped up. And he thought it would be a great gift for a doctor who was never going to see ham in the 2 years that he was assigned to Turkey. So we set off on a lovely warm day and drove to the border, went nicely through the Syrian side of the border. And when we got to the Turkish side, we were all asked by the extremely well-dressed and efficient-looking Turkish border guards to get out of the car. So we all got out, and the first assault, and they searched the car. And while the first assault was on the ham, the lead man said, he kept saying or pointing and indicating that he wanted Art to open the can. And if you remember what Hormel hams in a can look like, they have a picture of the ham on the surface. So Art kept pointing to the picture, saying that was what was inside, and that he was going on and on. And while he spoke some Arabic, none of us had very much in the way of Turkish. I only knew how to say thank you, so we were kind of stuck with the conversation. So when I was packing, I decided that if you were going to smuggle drugs into Turkey, that it would look obvious if you had them in boxes. So when we were packing, I emptied all the vials into my suitcase along with my clothes. I didn't put the boxes in the trunk. I just had the vials were all scattered through my clothes in the suitcase. So meanwhile, everybody's smiling and sort of trying to chit-chat. And one man reached in, took out my suitcase and set it in the road, opened the lid, and none of the vials were visible. But then he lifted up the clothes and dropped them back in, and vials rolled out all over the road. I mean, maybe 15 or 20 vials were rolling around on the road. And I am picturing myself in a prison in Turkey for the rest of my life, and I'm just shocked, and I'm staring at him. And he's looking at me, and then he gave a big smile, and he went out, and he picked up all the vials, and all they were all glass vials, but they were very heavy glass, so nothing had broken. He picked them all up and put them nicely back into my suitcase. And then he closed the lid and zipped it up and shook my hand. And I thought, wow, I'm a success at smuggling drugs. I have no idea what he thought they were. What on earth would he have thought they were? But in any event, I was now relieved. And meanwhile, Art had finally convinced the other guy that the ham what was inside was the picture on the outside. And so with some sigh of relief, we all got back in the car, and we started driving on to Gaziantep, which would have been another 100 miles or 50 miles. And we needed gas as we were driving along. We pulled into a gas station, and one of the other entertaining things about travel in those days was that we pulled into the gas station, and of course we were going to be waited on. So we all had to get out of the car, and all of us were served a bottle of what they called boobaloo, which was 7-Up, warm in glasses. And after some consideration, they came and announced that they didn't really have any gas. We got back in the car. We did that 3 times. And finally did get gas at one of the gas stations, did have gasoline, and we got to the hospital. And the doctor was, of course, ecstatic to get the ham and very ecstatic to get the drugs, which he said that there simply wasn't any in eastern Turkey, and that the doses I had brought would be enough for him to share with some of the other places that didn't have any penicillin. But penicillin was the thing that was missing. So I felt like a very successful smuggler, even though I felt that I had sort of escaped by some fluke that man at the border didn't know that those were drugs.